Welcome to the Talking Mortgage and Real Estate Podcast. What is the secret to success? How do successful people maintain their drive and desire? If you want answers to these and other questions, stay tuned. And now our host, John Collins.
Hey, everyone. Welcome back to the Talking Mortgage and Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, John Collins. I'm very excited today because we've got a great guest on that's going to educate us all about something very important coming up. So today I have Josh Tucker, and Josh is the appraisal manager for Interbank, and he also has his own appraisal company called Lakeside Appraisals. Josh has been appraising since 2018, and he acquired his license while he was working full-time at Interbank. And he also was running the appraisal department there. He's writing collateral policy and handling Federal Reserve audits prior to being licensed in 2016. And he holds a Bachelor of Economics from Oklahoma State, which hopefully people in Texas, please don't hold that against him. But he also spent 6 years in the Air Force. So Josh, welcome to the program today.
Well, thank you very much. And, just for a quick disclaimer, anything I say isn't Interbank's policies directly. These are just my own opinions and information as far as how things are going. But appreciate the intro and look forward to helping everyone kind of understand what's about to be on the way.
So talk a little bit about, because it caught my eye that you were in the Air Force for 6 years. So what was your job in the Air Force?
So I was a F-16 weapons technician. So I would basically work on the weapons system. So if any components were broken or damaged, you would do troubleshooting, or fault isolation tables is what they called it. And if you want to go through thousands of miles of wires in one aircraft, that's what you would have to do in that scenario.
Whereabouts were you stationed?
I was actually out of Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And so I worked on the F-16s up there, but I was also a weapons loader. And so I would actually load the munitions on the aircraft, climb in the cockpit, do troubleshooting, make sure everything worked like it was supposed to. And so I became very familiar with the F-16 and loved that aircraft to death. And but there's a love-hate relationship, I will say that.
Did you get your familiarization right in it? I guess you did if you were that intimate with the airplane.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more to learn on that airplane. It's amazing how many systems go into an aircraft and how many people and personnel it takes to keep an aircraft flying.
Absolutely.
It's not just the pilot. I mean, you've got your crew chiefs, your egress, your life support. You've got your fuel systems, your weapon systems, avionics. It keeps going. So
did you get your ride in the plane? Did they take you up?
I did not. I wish. There's only a handful of F-16D models which actually have two seats. One of them my unit did have, but it was stationed down in Houston, down there with their mission statement at that point. So no incentive ride, but that would have been a blast.
Yeah, so thank you for your service. From one veteran to another, I was in the Air Force as well. So I was air traffic control and did that. So so thank you. So tell me a little bit about your job.
So I'm the appraisal manager for Interbank. Basically, right now I'm their acting chief appraiser. So I take a look at all the appraisals. I choose our ordering platform. I write the policy to be in line with what the federal regulations have. Secondary market, I'm making sure that everything is going to the GSEs like it should, and that we're ordering the reports correctly, and trying to keep there from being any issues. If there's any discrepancies in appraisals, if it's something fairly simple, it doesn't get escalated to me. But if it does get more complex, I'll take a look at it and look at the SSRs that Fannie and Freddie issue on a report. And, they're saying, well, what about this one and that one? And so I start looking at those and saying, okay, we either have something that's actually good, or, well, that's something we don't need to address because it's not really accurate. Because believe it or not, the SSRs from Fannie and Freddie are not always accurate.
So I know part of what you do is also keep the industry aware of things. I know you're involved with some CFPB stuff and Fannie Mae and things like that. So, are you higher up? Are you more in policy than actually going out in the field and doing appraisals?
I still go out in the field and do appraisals. So I do both. And to me, it's very important to do both because when you are able to actually see what is occurring in the field, it allows you to be able to develop your policy to address some of the issues that I run into. I am trying to get more involved on the policy side just because we have seen, in this case, appraisal management companies, where they have really taken advantage of both consumers and appraisers. You have
Yes.
AMCs that will bid out to the lowest appraiser, and they even have their own staff appraisers now. So you have an AMC which has their own staff, and they give first priority to their staff appraisers before any independent appraisers. So, somebody sends an order to, AMC one, and they're like, okay, that'll be $720. But then they'll give it to their staff appraiser, pay the staff appraiser $250, and keep the rest that's undisclosed depending on which state you're in. Texas, it's just one aggregate fee. So the consumer has no idea that that extra money went to the AMC and not to their appraiser.
I'm
And
glad you brought that up, Josh, because that's been a sticking point for me with AMCs is the amount of markup that is involved over what the actual appraiser is getting.
yeah, and it's a real concern because some of the appraisals that are out there, if you're paying $250 for a report and then charging the appraiser $20 for it, it gets to be where the appraiser can't even realistically deliver a good report, especially in a 48-hour turn time. I know there's this huge push for 48 hours, but a lot of times we can't get even a realtor to call us back and let us know what was going on with a certain property. And, as an instance, there was a appraisal waiver that was issued on a property, and everyone kept telling me, use this comparable, use this comparable. And when I was looking at it, though, it sold for $80,000 over the list price. When I was finally able to get a call from the realtor, they let me know it was a waiver and that they were just desperate for the property and needed to get into something so that they weren't stuck in a rental property. And so they for it. And I did not use that as a comparable because to me, that was not a fair market value transaction because they bought it under duress.
Understood. Understood. So one of the reasons that we wanted to get together today is because there's an important subject that I don't think is well understood, and that is the what we call the ROV, which is the reconsideration of value. Explain a little bit to the audience what is that and what purpose does it serve in the appraisal community?
Yeah, so the reconsideration of value is a very important tool. Its primary purpose is that if the realtor or the consumer, whoever is, even the lender or underwriter, all three, anyone can initiate the ROV. And it's just basically to say, hey, we don't agree with your value. We would like you to take a look at additional information. The problem has been in the past with the ROVs, there's been no set standard. And so some lenders and mortgage companies had an ROV process, others did not. And everybody had a different way of doing it. So it was really confusing for consumers as to what they're able to do. Some even had no idea they could do the reconsideration of value. And it's important because there are times that we make mistakes and we will miss a comparable. And I will say that the MLS systems we use are only as good as the data that's input into them. So a lot of times, if you, especially in, let's just say the Park Cities area or University Park in Dallas, a lot of times those addresses are interchanged with each other. And so if you type in Dallas, you're going to miss some Park City cells. And if you park in Park Cities, you're also going to miss the Park City cells that are marked as Dallas. And so it's easy to miss a comparable that may be very valid and change the results. And that's important to have. And of course, we may mismark something that really isn't pertinent to the value materially. We may mark something as a slab, even though it's a pure and a slab foundation, and it's kind of iffy which way to go. It can go either way because those do exist. But it's really to make sure that the report is marked correctly and that we don't miss anything and that we give everyone a fair shot to make their case. I will say the biggest issue has been when it comes to ROVs is people will just send us 12 cells with no explanation as to why that is a better cell. And if you're going to do that, I mean, it can take me 3 hours to review those 12 cells to make sure that there's nothing pertinent. So the new ROV process that's out there is actually putting parameters that everybody has to abide by, and that should make it a lot easier for everyone.
So this is something that is just coming new that the industry needs to know about so that
Mhm.
they know that what the new requirements are then? Is that correct?
Yes. So HUD, Fannie Mae, and Freddie have all come out with actual ROV requirements now. Previously, the VA was the only one that really had set parameters for ROV. I mean, you had Tidewater, and then you had the additional, once the report's delivered, you had one more look at it. And then the VA could even technically override the appraisal value if they wanted to. For Freddie and Fannie, that previously has not existed, and it's been up to each individual institution to have one. So now the requirements basically are, as of effective 8/29, yeah, as of August 29th this year, that every financial institution that is dealing with Freddie or Fannie, and even HUD now is come out with some items, and I think FHFA is about to come out with their own too and make it permanent across all industries. But basically, as soon as a loan application is done and completed, that the lender has to give a ROV process and procedures to the borrower to where they know that they do have a right to challenge the appraisal. Myself, I don't agree with giving it at the time of loan application. I think it would make more sense at the time of loan disclosure, but that's what they chose. So yes, you will have to do it as soon as they do the loan application. And then again, once the appraisal is delivered and you give it to the consumer, you also have to send that exact same notice that you have a right to look at it from an ROV.
So
Um,
that as soon as we have an application that is triggered, in other words, we have the 6 items that makes it a true complete application. You're saying at that point, then it is going to be required to tell the borrower that we're going to do an appraisal and you have the right for a reconsideration on that appraisal when it comes back. Is that what I'm hearing?
yes, and you need to actually detail out the process as to, and basically you have the option to add 5 comparables to be looked at. Now, when you do that, you need to actually explain how those comparables are superior to what was in the report. And you'll also be able to address any material deficiencies as far as, if the appraiser accidentally put 2 garages when it was a 3-car garage, making sure that all that information is correct as well. So that can all be addressed at that time.
So let me ask this question then. You said that any one of the four, being the realtor, the lender, the buyer, or the underwriter, can request an ROV. Are they all bound to the same standard then, the same requirement to submit the ROV that you were just talking about?
They are. They're all bound to the same standard. So they did that to kind of get a control over appraisers being hit with 20 comparables sent to them, well, 20 cells sent to them at once.
Okay.
And they wanted to put some more control in it in that regards and actually start making even the agents take a look at what's out there and is this a real comparable? Because we would have people send us a cell that would support theirs, except for the fact it had been fully remodeled and the subject was original. So you couldn't really use a fully remodeled comparable to the subject, which is original finish outs.
So is this when we submit an ROV, does that go to the AMC and then the AMC gives it to you to follow up with? Is that the process?
That is correct. In this process, whenever the lender submits it or the consumer, and here's the other thing is you only get one shot at it. So you want to make sure you have it lined out very well
Make it,
because
yeah,
the underwriter can come back to us as many times as they want to kind of fix minor discrepancies in the report.
sure.
But yes, the lender, realtor, consumer, or the buyer only get one shot at the ROV process now. And so you want to make dang sure you have it accurate and well thought out, and you have really support for the comparables that you're sending for reconsideration.
So is there a time parameter that you have a certain amount of time to respond to that ROV then?
I have not seen that in the releases yet, as far as that goes, but it needs to be reasonable. Basically, it's like you can't be waiting on it for 2 weeks. Essentially, I think they want most of them to be a 1 week period. I would have to look at that, but I think within 1 week they want it resolved.
Okay. And is there going to be a standard form? I guess is what you're saying. There's going to be a standard form to submit the ROV.
Unfortunately, not a standard form. Every institution is basically going to have to develop their own, but it has to have those parameters
Those
within it.
certain things. Okay. So talk to me a little bit about what are the most common reasons why an ROV is requested?
The biggest issue, what I can find, is that realistically, how agents price the properties. A lot of them will use price per square foot, which is good if you know what is actually within that number. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't realize that within that number is the value of the land. It's your amenities, it's your pool, your sheds, your workshop. All that information is within that number. And so if you're taking that and say you have, a property that's nearby that's 1,700 square feet, sold at $200 a square foot, and then you have your subject, which is at $2,000 a square, or sorry, 2,000 square feet, and you apply that same number to it, well, now you've added that land value into that difference in gross living area, and it over adjusts. And so that is the biggest contributor to the ROV request issues. I'll also say another way to resolve that is, honestly, I know some appraisers don't like it. I actually do. I would love to see an appraiser packet for me. So whenever I go to a home, have the list of comparables that the realtor used to come up with their list price. Having the seller disclosure in there, as well as a list of upgrades that's along with the seller disclosure in MLS, that goes a long way too, because we can see, all right, roof was replaced here, HVAC replaced there, it was updated in 2019, and that stuff helps us in regards to understanding the effective age of the property.
Just to go off a little bit to the left on this, when do you see a lot of miscalculations on gross living area and what goes into that gross living area and what doesn't go into it?
Yes, there's a lot of mislistings in MLS in regards to that, because right now we have to go under ANSI, which is the American National Standards. I think, yeah, American National Standards. Well, let me make sure on that. Let me Google it.
Okay.
Just want to make sure I have it. American National Standards Institute. So the Fannie Mae adopted ANSI back in 2021, which really defined the guidelines of what an appraiser has to measure by. And that basically means everything that is within heated, basically it's heated and within the walls. As soon as you go outside that initial heated area, even if it's an ADU, a mother-in-law suite, a guest quarters, whatever, as soon as you leave that initial area and have to go outside of it into another one, that's no longer considered part of the gross living area. That is separate. Same with basements. Basements are not considered part of the gross living area. And so we see these often added into the overall living area of the property. And that creates absolute chaos, because they're also trying to apply the price per square foot to that entire number metric. And it gets very, very crazy, very fast, and not to mention an absolute nightmare for us to find the correct comparables whenever it's all bunched together.
Right. So what percentage of appraisals do you find end up with an ROV request?
Surprisingly, from our side, very few. I would say less than 10%. Usually, whenever we get the information, because you're supposed to actually, as a lender, this will be another requirement of the ROV. You're supposed to verify the ROV request you're getting is actually legitimate and not just information thrown together and to be thrown towards the appraiser. So the lenders are going to be required to vouch for that information and say that it's legit. But I lost my train of thought here.
The percentage
Yeah.
of, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say less than 10%. I'd actually probably say less than that. And because most people are most of the properties that are out there are in fairly similar neighborhoods, similar quality construction. And so they're pretty easy to comp in that regards. But now when really where you start seeing the ROV requests is when you have a brand new subdivision where there's not any comparables yet, and they're trying to push the market prices up. Or if you have a property on a lot of land, you start getting workshops involved. When you start getting your more complex properties is where the ROV requests really start coming into play.
Okay. So can an ROV negatively impact the appraisal process or the relationship between the appraiser and the client?
I have definitely seen that happen. There are blacklists out there where appraisers who don't make value so many times will, an AMC will put them on a blacklist, or well, not technically a blacklist. They will do what's called a scorecard, and that scorecard, if you miss it so many times, they'll give you a low score, and then you're put way down on the list to where you really don't ever get put in the rotation again.
Is
Unfortunately,
that
most
from
appraisers,
low appraisals? Is that
for
from
appraisers
low?
that, yeah, for appraisers that don't make value, they'll
It,
yeah,
okay.
they will take you that you can lose work for coming in low. Not the way it's supposed to work, but that is actually the way it does work. And there's been times where underwriters have told us to do things that violate USPAP, and I've had my fair share of running into underwriters that will tell me to violate USPAP. And one of those perfect examples is where the transfer of an appraisal. So the transfer of an appraisal has absolutely nothing to do with the appraiser. That is strictly between lenders. And whenever an appraisal goes to a new lender, they have to accept that report as is.
As is.
And at that point in time, they're not able to come back to the original appraiser and say, hey, this was transferred to us. We need you to change this, this, and that. Because under USPAP, that's basically that is administrative law in the state of Texas, as well as almost every other state, well, basically every state in the US. So if we violate that, we can be turned into the state and we can be punished and fined. So
Okay.
whoever orders the report, that is who our client is. And that is the only person we can talk to unless that client gives us permission to talk to somebody else. Even then, if they give us permission to talk to this other lender that it was transferred to, we still can't change that report because they were not the original client.
Oh,
And
interesting. Okay.
yeah, and so that gets to be complicated. I know that's caused a lot of issues. So, I mean, the best way to handle that is just to say, hey, we just need to re-engage you. You can use the same effective date, and then you can make those adjustments at that time. And it may be an additional $100 just to cover our time, but it definitely beats screaming at the appraiser and trying to get them blacklisted and calling them hard to work with. And it's not that we're trying to be hard to work with. We're just protecting our license.
Right. Right. So I know in the past that if an appraisal came back low, that we could simply give you a certain number of comps and say, hey, did you consider this? So is the new process, will that do away with that? It's no longer just a communication. It's got to go through the ROV. Is that, or are we still able to deliver you, hey, this house was updated and so, did you realize that, or whatever it might be?
Yeah, they want it to go through the official ROV process so it can be documented, and then that
Okay.
way everybody can cover each other. So if somebody claims bias, they can go back through the process and see, okay, was an ROV process done? All right, what was discussed in the ROV process? And that way it covers lender, appraiser, consumer, it leaves a formal.
Documentation,
Yeah.
documentation. Yeah. So let me ask you a question. So why is it important for the appraiser, and this is a little bit off of ROV, but why is it important for the appraiser to have a copy of the contract before they do the appraisal?
And it's like, so we are actually required under USPAP to analyze every contract. So anytime there's a purchase, we have to analyze it. That's just what they've required. Now, if we're not provided the contract, we have to state that we weren't provided it. But a lot of times we'll see leasebacks in there where there may be a leaseback where the property is sold for, 390,000, but it's sold at a higher price because the person's doing a leaseback for, say 3 months. And we have to account for that and adjust for to make that cash equivalent. And you will also see contracts where somebody will pay, $30,000 to buy down the interest rates for the buyer. That's all information that we have to look into. And Fannie Mae is very clear on interested party contributions as to if they are actually inflating the market values to take them into consideration. So that's all information we have to look at. And I mean, I've even seen a mansion where $200,000 in personal property was included in the purchase, and that's not part of the collateral. And so we have to explain that in our report. It's like, okay, yes, it was shown on MLS that it was bought for, 3.8 million. But after you take out $200,000 in the personal property, we're at, I thought I said 3.8, so 3.6 million. But we have to adjust for all that information.
Yeah. We've had it several times on our end where we'll get a contract in and it will have personal items in the contract, and it's like, no, you need to take that out. That can't be in the contract.
Yeah,
So
it's like you're not gonna Fannie Mae is not gonna lend on personal property, or no GSE is gonna lend on personal property. Now, a portfolio loan could, but that's up to each individual lender.
so is there anything else in the appraisal industry that you think we as co participants, realtors, lenders need to understand about the appraisal process? Anything that gives you pain on a regular basis?
I will say the biggest pain is having our hands tied in what we can discuss. So, um, the amount of times I've had people call me, like, just a realtor call me and say, well, this one really should be higher. And it's like, okay, I can't discuss the results of the report with you. That's really the hardest part. And it's not because we're trying to be stubborn. We just literally can't. And so, I will say realistically, the way that the current processes are for how a lot of lenders use AMCs has also really not helped with communication. I have seen AMCs blame things that the underwriter was requesting for. So we're easy targets to be blamed for things that are out of our control. There's also a lot of requirements and engagement letters that people will see in our reports that they aren't aware that are in the engagement letter. So they may be complaining about, well, why'd you put 3 active listings in there and then not weight them? Well, our engagement letter stated we had to. And so, but active listings are active and we can't really put much weight on them, and especially if you're taking a look at the overall neighborhood and seeing that the sales price to list price is on average 10% below what the list prices are.
Right.
So
I remember the pre-AMC days. It was a lot easier to communicate things, and then they really tamped down on that, and no longer, I can't even pick the phone up and talk to you, So
yeah.
it's all got to go through the AMC now. But a lot of that came out of abuse of the system, and so
Mhm.
it's not totally a bad thing.
No, and what a lot of people don't understand though is you don't actually have to use an appraisal management company. My lending institution does not. We have a direct order platform that we handle all our orders through, both commercial and residential. Now they run through an appraisal department, which I'm the head of. And so me and my uh, employees basically make sure everything is done according to the law. We do allow some communication between the lender and the appraiser, but it's all through that platform and we can monitor it. So we can step in at any time and say, no, now you're violating appraiser independence requirements, or you're pushing for something you shouldn't be. And so, yeah, it's very much still able to be done. Just a lot of people have found it cheaper to go the AMC route. But when you do that, you also run the risk of losing good quality reports. Most of our appraisers, we typically pay anywhere from 500 to $650. And then if it's more complex, we'll go a lot higher than that. But that gives us a much better appraiser who's going to take their time and actually analyze the market, explain the adjustments, what's happening, so that the report is able to be read fairly easily. And we also aren't of the opinion we need this report in 48 hours. 48 hours is just, to me, when people actually see how much we have to do in the report, 48 hours isn't reasonable between having to call, get it scheduled, do the inspection, drive the comparables, get home, pull all the comps, and then analyze all the comparable information, extract the market data. It can take an easy 6 to 8 hours to do a basic appraisal if you're doing it properly.
Right. I don't have any great love affair for AMC, so I'm not going to sugarcoat it. But is there anything in the future that might rein in some of the AMC abuse? I hesitate to use that word, but as far as I'm concerned, with the consumer, it is abuse. Is there anything coming up that might rein that in a little bit?
There is some discussions with regulators in that regards. The Appraisal Institute's pushing the issue. I've been pushing the issue and working with appraisers across the U.S., collecting information showing what is actually happening and trying to get that to the regulators. And because, yes, ultimately we need full disclosure and transparency in regards to that fee, because it's absolutely crazy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's,
Yes.
there's no reason a consumer shouldn't know that, well, why'd you only pay my appraiser $250? It's like you charge me $720 or $800, and I've seen fees up to $1,000. And and I will say this, like there's even a particular company out there now, and this is absolutely, a lot of us turn them in for this, but they charge us for the platform. So it's $30 to use their platform for every order. Then they mandate that you have to be paid through an ACH. So that's another $29 for the ACH to be paid. And then they recently tacked on another fee of $29 to actually review the report they ordered from us.
Okay.
So we're getting
that's ridiculous. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think this is something that everybody needs to become aware of, especially since August 29th, that these changes are going to go into effect. So I appreciate you coming on and kind of educating us about what's coming here in a couple months. So is everything finalized now on this August 29th, or is it still in review and there could be a few more changes before it hits the table?
I would not be surprised if there's a few more changes. For the most part, it's pretty much finalized on the GSE side. But as we know, the GSEs can change the rules next week. And so, the best we can hope for is to keep looking out for their press releases and to change our policies as need be as they change theirs.
Well, if you have time, I would like to invite you back, maybe in mid-August, after we know how everything's going to settle out, and you can kind of give us, the overview of what was finalized before this thing goes active. So I hope you'll come back and join us for that.
Yeah, I'd love to. I'm really trying to get out and, tell loan officers what's going on, what's actually happening. Helping realtors understand processes a little bit better, just because at this point in time, we've been so disconnected from each other within the industry that nobody knows what's going on and who has to abide by what laws. And there really needs to be more camaraderie among everyone again to try and make things a little bit better, because
everybody's afraid. Everybody's afraid to talk to you.
Yeah, everybody's afraid to talk to us, and I promise appraisers would love to talk to you. We just may not be able to talk about that specific assignment.
Exactly. So,
but yeah, a lot of people will be surprised how willing we are to try and educate people how we have to do things.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Josh. I sure do appreciate you coming on today, and we'll stay in touch with you. We'll look for you to come back and give us that update.
Sounds good. I look forward to it.
All right. Thank you very much. And thanks to everybody for watching today. I hope you found it informative. I know I did. And so it's something important for all of us, the lenders watching and the real estate agents, to also become familiar with before this goes into effect. So have yourself a great day, and we'll see you later.